Ooh. Okay, it's a good afternoon from me. I would have done a live stream yesterday, however, I had some technical issues with the trusty old laptop, which is unfortunately nearing the end of its usable life. So it's just got to hold on a couple more weeks. So unfortunately, we are a little bit late in doing the 1,140 subscriber special, but here we are. Now, a lot has happened. A lot has happened in sport the last few days, especially in rugby league. Rugby league has had some ups and downs all in the same weekend. So there's a new TV deal that's been agreed between the Super League and Sky for the rights to show every single Super League game will now be live on the TV. How that impacts the Channel 4 arrangement that's in place, I haven't read into that, but I know Sky is now signed a new agreement where it will be showing every single Super League game live for less money. So the new TV deal with Sky is worth less money, but there's more games. Work that one out. The London Broncos beat Toulouse 18-14 in Toulouse. They were 14-4 down at half time. They blitzed them in the second half, and they're back in the Super League, so that's positive. We've got a team in London in the top flight once again. And the Newcastle Thunder have folded. So there's some joy at the top end of rugby league with the Broncos making it back to Super League. New TV deal that's not worth as much money, but more games are now televised. How that works out, I don't know, and how that impacts the Channel 4 TV deal that's in place as well for live free-to-air coverage of a select number of games we shall see. But at the bottom end of the professional structure, clubs are going out of business or clubs are going to amateur status. So League One is in a bit of a mess. We don't know what the future is going to hold for next season. Concern about the viability of League One below the Championship and the viability of those clubs and how much money they can or can't make. So we'll see how that plays out, the organised game going forward, and whether the game can be profitable because teams are losing money. And now there's only 8 teams left in League One for next season. Well, obviously, the London Scholars have gone to amateur status and have pulled out. They're not financially viable. The Newcastle, formerly Gateshead Thunder, they've basically been wound up. We don't know what's happening there. They released a statement saying they're not going to be competing next season in League One. They got relegated from the Championship this year. I believe there's another club that pulled out as well, which makes me concerned about the future of Cornwall Rugby League Football Club as well, considering that the travel distances and the cost associated with that, and the fact that they are down in Cornwall, down in where is it? It's near Truro they play. So there are concerns about viability long term. I think it's 3 out of the bottom 4 teams or something. 3 out of the teams have pulled out. So there is concerns about the viability and IMG and their involvement and what's going to happen. There's going to be some meetings, some questions being asked of the RFL about what's going to happen and potential restructuring of the game below Championship level and what the future holds. But London Broncos back in Super League, Wigan winning the grand final, Super League grand final over Catalan. So there's some success at the top and there's some concerns at the bottom of the pyramid. The Pacific Nations Rugby League tournaments kicked off last weekend. Obviously, Tonga will be playing England over the next 3 weekends, so that we'll see how that viewership on TV and crowd numbers are there. But the crowd numbers for the Pacific tournament have been pretty decent, both in the men's and women's so far. And we'll see how that plays out. There's been some question marks over some of the selections of some of the players, but it is what it is. Samoa have got selected a pretty strong side in the women's game. New Zealand have selected a pretty strong side, and it was a very close game between New Zealand and Australia in the women's, which is good. Samoa, they had a bit of a poor first half against Australia, but they had a pretty decent second half. Unfortunately, obviously, players are missing through injury, and there's a lot of player turnover as well from the World Cup final last year. Rugby union, let's move on to the semi-finals. France and Ireland, the top 2 nations in the world, didn't make it past the quarter-final stage. obviously the media narrative surrounding Ireland and their quarter-final hurdle they can't overcome is obviously continuing. Um, that ongoing narrative is going to continue to be a narrative over the next 4 years until the next World Cup in Australia. We have to see how that plays out. But all four quarterfinals were fantastic entertainment. All of them very, very close until right till the end. There was no blowout scores, really intense finishes. But yeah, we shall see what happens with the Ireland setup and Andy Farrell, and whether he's the coach in 4 years' time, or if in the next World Cup cycle he moves on and is replaced by someone else. England's the only unbeaten nation left at the World Cup. Every other team has lost at least one game. France have obviously gone out to South Africa. Um, and no, much has been made of that. But the fans have been fantastic. Let's not kid ourselves. The fans have been fantastic. Crowd numbers have been really good. The atmosphere has been fantastic. Fans have been fantastic. So make of that what you will. Also, football news: Birmingham City. John Eustace has been sacked and replaced by Wayne Rooney. Now, I have sympathy for John Eustace. Birmingham City are doing really well this season. Go to the international break. Players come back from the international break. They have a new manager. Now, it's not Wayne Rooney's fault. I don't blame Wayne Rooney for wanting to take the job and ultimately, get back into management in England. Problem with that, I think he's unfairly criticised for the Derby County situation. Obviously, DC United didn't have a very good team anyway, but they weren't the worst team in the MLS. They just didn't qualify for the postseason. But the way the MLS is structured is completely different to European football. He decided to take some time out of the English game, coach overseas, and learn his trade a bit more. But I feel sorry for John Eustace. I think the way that the new owners of Birmingham City have handled that hasn't been great. Yeah, so Birmingham City fans aren't overly happy with the decision to replace managers at this point of the season. I feel a bit of sympathy for Wayne Rooney because he's gone into a club where the fans don't particularly want him there. He obviously has got to think of his career and obviously learning his trade, and you never know, he might actually really get Birmingham on a good run and they might get automatic promotion. We just don't know what's going to happen there, but it's new owners, and generally when there is a takeover, the old manager's out, and in with the new guy, of course, it's American ownership group, and Wayne already having played in the US, coached in the US, they brought in their guy. But I don't think it's a bad move for Wayne Rooney. I think it's the way it's been handled has been a bit not so good. So we shall see what happens there. There's not been a single sacking in the Premier League yet, which is interesting. Now, obviously, in Brussels the other night with the Sweden fans and the terrorist incident, that's left a bitter taste in the mouths of many and raises a few eyebrows about security and what's going on in the Middle East right now, and in Ukraine and Russia as well. And there's been a bit of political debate about should Wembley's arch being lit up or not. And there's too much politics and professional sport. They don't mix very well. Politics and sport don't mix very well at all. But that's created a division on social media. Kind of happy I got rid of my Twitter, to be fair, or X. So that's been a big discussion point. In the cricket, the Dutch are beating the South Africans, and England have been beaten by Afghanistan. So two really upset results that weren't expected. But I don't think the Cricket World Cup is getting as much coverage as it did 4 years ago. It's getting less coverage, and it's been overshadowed by the problem with the Cricket World Cup is they play it at the same time as the Rugby Union World Cup. And a lot of the time when Euro or World Cup qualifiers are taking place in regards to football. So they do get overshadowed by other major sporting events. And so I don't think the Cricket World Cup is getting the coverage, but there's been some interesting results, some shock results with the Dutch beating the South Africans and Afghanistan beating England and convincingly beating England. So people are going, oh, this England side, the record's exactly the same at the same stage as it was 4 years ago. 4 years ago was 4 years ago. Other teams have improved, selection, various things. So we'll see how that plays out. It would be nice to have a bit more cricket on free-to-air coverage, but it is what it is. The ECB and other major cricketing events. They've decided. Um, well, the Cricket World Cup will get more coverage and interest once the Rugby World Cup is over. Will it? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. They're obviously playing it a little bit later than they did 4 years ago, um, because obviously it's over in India and the weather conditions are weather conditions up in Europe. You can't really play cricket this time of year in Europe. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, the Dutch beating the South Africans, who are heavily fancied, and England losing to Afghanistan, that does create discussion. Um, Obviously, Scotland, going back to football, have qualified for the next Euros. I think Steve Clarke, as I said when he was appointed all those years ago as Scotland manager, I think was the right appointment. Scotland have had a massive change in fortune since he's been in charge, and they got back-to-back Euros. They obviously missed out on the World Cup in the last international cycle, but they've qualified for the Euros in Germany next year, which is fantastic. Um, so it's good to see Scotland competitive on the international stage once again. It's been a very long time, generation in fact, since Scotland last had a decent international side. They've gone through some really tough times, and they're qualified by right. There's no playoff involved to get into the Euros next summer in Germany. They put the effort in and they're there. In regards to the Cricket World Cup getting more coverage, we shall see. We shall see if it does get more coverage once the Rugby World Cup is over and the three-test series between England and Tonga in the Rugby League is completed. I think it obviously depends on how well England, Ireland, and Scotland, no, England and Ireland, should I say, do at the Cricket World Cup. For them getting coverage here in the UK and Ireland with the British and Irish media. I think the Irish media is in meltdown over their failure to get over through past the quarterfinals in the Rugby World Cup. So they're dissecting the Ireland setup, which I think is completely unfair. I mean, they lost to the fourth best nation in the world, who are the All Blacks. It wasn't as if they, got battered by Fiji or anything like that. They were playing one of the best sides in the world, and they are one of the best sides in the world, and it was a fantastic Test match. I'm not sure if they are or not. I don't know how the 50 over game is different. I know they're in the T20. Ireland are a Test nation, so I know Scotland aren't in this edition of the Cricket World Cup. But there's a pre-qualifying tournament for the lesser ranked nations, and there's a couple of Test nations who had to go through the qualification process. I think T20 there's more nations involved, but the fact that the focus of Irish sport. Because Republic aren't going to qualify for the Euros and Northern Ireland are basically missing out. A lot of their international media focus is on the Rugby World Cup, and now that Ireland are out, you'll see how it plays out. But I haven't really been paying too much attention to the Cricket World Cup. Don't get me wrong, I love my cricket and I like watching T20 and one day internationals just as much as I like watching a test match. But the way the media covers it and the way the TV rights are negotiated, it's put behind a paywall. And there's a reason why peak viewership of the last World Cup, which was the final, was approximately 10 million less than the peak viewership in 2005 during the peak of the Ashes on the third test, of the third day of the third test at Trent Bridge. They've lost 10 million casual viewers for a reason. And you could say the Sky Sports paywall is part of that reason. And now we see Sky Sports have agreed a new TV deal for Super League. That means every game is shown, but is worth less money. We are at a time when teams are going out of business or struggling to survive. It is a head scratcher. I do not understand where we're going with this, considering not that long ago, Channel 4 said we'll have some games on free-to-air coverage. So I don't know. This is the concern I have: is Sky Sports or Sky B can just turn the taps off financially, and a sport is basically on its knees. It could happen to cricket. It will happen to rugby league if Sky go, oh, the viewership isn't great. Well, we don't like this TV deal. We're not going to negotiate for another one. Sky has the power to kill rugby league completely. Yeah, so when it comes to the future, I've done a video discussing the future of TV rights and media rights negotiations and the potential for streaming companies like Netflix to get in on the act. Considering Netflix have done a lot of sports documentaries, fly on the walls, and they've done documentaries about past teams and players and individuals in sport. Netflix have hinted that they are potentially interested in actually signing up for live sports rights, and that will be a game changer. Amazon are already in. Disney own ESPN, so Disney are already in the sports right game with ESPN over in North America. It will be a game changer if Netflix, for example, were to have uh, sports rights. If they were to bid, if they were to get live sport on Netflix. Firstly, I'm a Netflix subscriber, so I have a Netflix account. It'll be interesting to see if that impacts, because I go for the base package where I get ads and I can't download and save TV series or films. So I've got the basic package, which isn't actually that bad. I haven't got the premium or the multi-account package. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts my subscription and how much I would have to pay. I think it is good news that there's a team in the capital. If you're starting up a professional league in rugby league in this country, let's say you want to do what the NRL have done, have teams, you would have a team in the capital. You would have a team in London. You would have a team in Cardiff. You would have a team in Edinburgh. You would actually have and you would have a team in Belfast. If you were starting up a pro league right now, you would have a team in London. Look at the Elite Ice Hockey League, for example. 3 out of the 4 capitals have, or did have, because Edinburgh pulled out. But at one point, the Elite League Ice Hockey had a team in Cardiff, which they still do, a team in Belfast, which they still do, and a team in Edinburgh. So while the Edinburgh team failed, if you were to do a professional league right now from scratch and go, these are the locations we're going to have a top first grade team, London will be on your list. You would want to have a team in Birmingham. That should be on your list. Unfortunately, the way the RFL and Super League and the powers that be have gone around expanding out of the traditional locations. Now, the London Broncos have been going since the 1980s. This is not a team that's just been started up. They were called Fulham Rugby League Club originally. They became the London Broncos. The issue with London Broncos is not that there aren't fans in London. They haven't had decent teams in the past. The problem is they have never had their own stadium. They've always been anchor tenants of a football club. So it started off as Fulham. They played at Charlton. They played at Harlequins. That's rugby union. They played at Ealing, which is another rugby union. They're now playing at Plough Lane, which is Wimbledon. They have moved around the capital. They have never had their own stadium to call their own. They are anchor tenants of someone else's stadium. So that's where that cost comes in. Yeah, in regards to League One and the Newcastle Thunder and the London Scholars are still going as a team. They haven't folded. They've just gone to amateur status and they're basically now community game only. They pulled out of professional ranks. And again, it's to do with costs. The Newcastle Thunder's statement said that the growth of the game in the northeast has not been of the level anticipated. So, what's the point of Magic Weekend in Newcastle if you can't have a professional team in Newcastle or Gateshead? What is the point of having a professional team if they're saying that the development of the game in the northeast? I will discuss sports in the northeast and why rugby league doesn't work there or has never really established itself in the northeast, because I've got friends from the northeast. It's football country. It is Newcastle United, Sunderland, Hartlepool, and Middlesbrough. It's football country. It is. And they've established themselves. And Sunderland and Newcastle, historically, very successful clubs. Very successful clubs. Durham County Cricket Club, very successful cricket team. It's football and cricket and then rugby union, in that order. Ice hockey's tried and failed in the northeast. Rugby league has now tried and failed in the northeast. And what they stated was that the development and growth of the game was not growing at the rate they anticipated. And now, yes, the Newcastle Falcons, very successful side historically. They have money problems. They were the ones, pumping the money in. Now, the fact that they couldn't get Newcastle United as the football club involved as well is a problem. The fact that the major professional sports teams in Newcastle have different ownership. This is where the Bristol model with Bristol City and the Bristol Pitbulls and the Bristol Rugby Union all be owned by the same individual sometimes pays off. It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs. The people who own the Maple Leafs own the Blue Jays, the Marlies, which is the AHL affiliate. They own multiple teams. They own Toronto FC. They own about 8, 9, all in the city of Toronto. And it works. So if one of them is struggling a little bit, the one that's financially working well can put a little bit, Maple Leaf Entertainment, I believe it is. The problem that you have is, look, we've lost one of the London teams from the professional ranks. They've gone to amateur status. Now, I'm not saying the London Scholars are going to just stay an amateur club. They may come back to League One when it's financially viable, which would be great because then they could be a feeder team to the London Broncos where they could send development players down just to get some game time on loan and then bring them up to the senior squad, which I don't think that's a problem. The problem we have is the TV deal was shit, and the new TV deal is even worse than the TV deal we currently have, worth less money. Some of the stadiums are in terrible, terrible state. And back in 2018, and I'm going to stress this, when the New Zealand touring side came up for 3 tests, they didn't sell out a single game. Did not sell out a single game. Cookie Crusher, yes, I've noticed you've been watching my football club history series. There's about 120 videos, so you've got a lot of watching to do. I've been doing them for years, but really focused on the last 2 years. You've got 2 years worth of football club history, so I've got some more lined up. I'm going to be focusing more on the European leagues and some of the more obscure clubs in Europe because there's some fun ones to look at. But I do that as a bit of a stopgap filler when maybe there's not a lot of sport happening or we're in between major sporting events. The football club histories are fun. It doesn't matter what time of year or when in the season I do them, they are fun because you find out some really interesting stats. Well, that's my take on England losing to Afghanistan. Round robin formats in tournaments like the Cricket World Cup, you are going to get some of these results. But Afghanistan are a test side. Let's not forget this. They are a test team. They've gone through a qualification process to make the World Cup. Now, obviously, with the political situation in Afghanistan and the social situation with the earthquakes and all that, I mean, this means a lot to these players. What's my take on it? You're going to get results like this in round robins because you've got to use your whole squad. You've got to use your whole squad in an international tournament. You have to. You can't just go, right, okay, we're going to stick with our starting 11 or we're going to stick with starting 11. You may adjust. You have. It's a squad game. You have to rotate. Yeah, England have always had problems on the subcontinent. It doesn't matter if it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, or Sri Lanka. They've always had problems with spin in T20, one day, and Test cricket on Indian pitches. That is a known fact. We can all agree on that. And also the lack of depth as spin options for spinners that England aren't selecting is a concern as well. Now, I haven't been following the Cricket World Cup. I haven't been following cricket as religiously as I used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm assuming, obviously, you're a newer viewer, so therefore you may not have seen a lot of my cricket content. Most of my cricket content on this channel is back in 2018 and 2019. I've fallen out of love with the sport, not because I don't like watching the sport, playing the sport. It's the way the media rights are organised and the lack of accessibility and the governance is crap. Let's be honest. Cricket governance is really bad. Corruption is rife in the sport. What we've seen with this Indian World Cup is the state of the playing surface has been, what are we playing on? The state of the playing surface is not great. It reminds me of the 2007 World Cup out in the Caribbean, where some of the pitches, outfields were absolutely diabolical. But no, England losing to Afghanistan doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me because it's a round robin phase of the tournament, and you've got to use your squad. Some of the depth players have been shown up. There's a lot of expectation as the holders. They're a big scalp. Other teams will look at them and go, right, these are the best team in the world 4 years ago. They're the holders. We're going to target this guy. And if you get them in the right conditions and you bowl in the right way, and you bat in the right way, you field in the right way, and you put pressure, you've got to do your take work. You've got to look at this player doesn't like playing bounces. This player struggles with off spin. That player struggles playing leg spin. This player struggles with batting against medium pace because of the flight of the ball. This batsman's weak off his back foot. You've got to focus. if you're bowling on the bowling attack, go right. This batsman's got weakness on the left hand side. Right. Well, four teams. Look, India are hosts. India are playing at home. They're going to be in the semis. New Zealand, they've shown time and time again for a small country where it's not the national sport, where they've got limited resources in regards to most athletes play rugby union or rugby league. And that's where most of the money is in professional sport. They always produce top quality short format and test players. I think England will still make the final four. And Christ, it's a difficult one for the fourth one, but I think South Africa will bounce back from that defeat to the Netherlands. That will wake them up a little bit. So I think it will be New Zealand, India, England, South Africa will be the final four. I don't think Australia are going to make the final four. They might do. A big nation's going to fail to make the semi-finals, and then we'll have that debate, much like Ireland in the rugby union, failing to get past the quarterfinals for the 8th time, and the French as the host failing to get past the quarterfinals in their own World Cup. We can then have that debate again about a big nation or a top nation not getting to the latter stages, because there's only a limited amount of how far you can go. There's only a limited amount of knockout games. It can only go so far. Someone has to, unfortunately, not make it to the stage they want to make it to. It's like in the women's football, the USA not going far in the tournament and falling flat. The Canadians, who are Olympic champions in the women's football, not getting out of the group stage. There were some shocks in the Women's World Cup this summer in the football. We saw, obviously, Samoa in the Rugby League World Cup make all the way to the final. No one was expecting that after their hammering in game one. You will get shocks in international World Cups and World Championships. You will get shocks where a nation overachieves or underachieves. Now, if England can't bounce back in their next game after the loss to Afghanistan, and if the South Africans have another wobble, then that completely changes the dynamic of the tournament. Pakistanis have been poor, which surprises me, because they've got they can pull anything out of the hat. They can pull off some of the best one-day and T20 cricket you'll ever see. Sri Lanka not playing particularly well. Another one. So but it's the group stage, it's the round robin format. You will get shock results in there, but when we get to the latter stages, it's who strings together a bit of momentum and can adapt to Indian conditions. The pitches haven't been great. The pitches have been criticised by every single side. Even the Indians have gone, this pitch is crap. So there has been a lot of criticism of the playing surfaces, the fielding surface, but some of the locations they're playing. I mean, that the ground where up in the Himalayas in the Punjab is beautiful. Like the fact that they're playing international cricket at that altitude with the Himalaya mountains behind it's just stunning. You won't get that out anywhere else in the world. But I think the issue that cricket has is how it tries to promote itself globally. It's a fantastic sport. It's a great community sport. It's a fantastic sport. It has the potential, if the Americans are generally serious about investing with a cricket super league in the US, it has the potential to really explode. It's a great sport as it is, but it has the potential to be an even bigger sport. Once the Americans take an interest and want to invest in a sport, that's where sky's the limit. So this is where football and rugby union are miles ahead at international quality level, because the Americans have invested in Major League Soccer, for example. They're hosting their second World Cup in 3 years' time. Rugby union, they've got the rights to the World Cup in 8 years' time, and the women's in 10. They've got an international program. Now, admittedly, they didn't qualify for this World Cup, but they've been to every World Cup. They've won Olympic medals in rugby union. Rugby league is on the cusp with these games going to Vegas. Oh, there you go. I mean, look, the fact that the IOC, that means Los Angeles, the Americans are going to have to field a team. The US will have to have a team. That completely changes the conversation. As soon as the US get enough players of a standard, they're going to want to double down. They're going to want to continue to grow sport domestically. Once the Americans get interested, the Americans have got to be the best at everything. If there's a World Cup or a World Championships and they hear about it and they haven't got a team, they ask, why have we not got a team in this sport? They have to win at everything. They don't, but they have to. That's sort of the American logic. They've got to be, they are going to have, but that means they're going to have to invest in the infrastructure, which means they're going to have to invest in a playing team. They're going to have to develop players. They can't just rely on, you know, South African, Australian, Kiwi, and Brits, expats who've not quite made it to Test or T20 or one day level for them. They can't just solely rely on expat players who have a dubious link either via residency or a parent or a grandparent to build a team. They're going to have to invest at grassroots level. Now, baseball, which is very, very interesting, Major League Baseball, has got a declining fan base, yet still makes $10 billion a year, yet there's massive issues with baseball. Less kids are playing the game. Fans' attendances are not as good as as is claimed by Major League Baseball. They've just had a lockout. They've had issues with players threatening to go on strike before the lockout. Now, because the IOC have agreed 5 years' time to have cricket at the Olympics, the US have got 5 years to ridiculously invest in the sport. Ridiculously invest. Now, the good thing is about having the Olympics in LA and cricket there is the weather conditions are going to be absolutely fantastic for a nice hard surface, which is going to give itself to pace bowling and potentially spin once they've played a couple of games and the cracks appear in the playing surface. So they are going to have the best playing conditions because of the climate in Southern California. The weather conditions will be perfect for it. Now, you might get a bit of swing bowling in there. Now, how the qualification process is going to work for the cricket at the Olympics, I don't know. Obviously, Scotland will have to, if they are willing to give players, be in negotiations with the ECB, which is England and Wales. Northern Ireland is covered by the Republic. So Ireland are going to want to qualify. They're a test nation. Scotland are an associate nation of the ICC. So they're probably going to have to go with the UK and say, okay, we're going to have to merge forces just for this Olympics. Northern Ireland's an interesting one because when it comes to cricket, I believe Northern Ireland is covered by the Republic, similar to rugby union. So that'd be interesting if any of the Irish squad, if they were to qualify, would come from Belfast or Derry, Londonderry. That'd be very, very interesting. So the home nations, it could be very interesting if they decide, to put their, well, England are going to, Great Britain's going to have a team. Ireland are going to have a team. They've already got the professional players. They've already got they're both test nations. The Dutch obviously have a very good one-day and T20 program. They're at the World Cup right now. Obviously, you've got nations like Zimbabwe and Namibia. Zimbabwe are a test nation. Namibia are a one-day and T20 nation. So there are some cricketing nations that otherwise wouldn't really have a chance at a medal, potentially sending players and a team over. The West Indies will be interesting because they can't compete as the West Indies. That'll be the individual Caribbean islands playing as so that'll be interesting how the West Indian Cricket Board, what nation they're going to go, right, we're going to get our funding behind a Jamaican or a Trinidad team or a Guyana team. That's the big nations when it comes to cricket for producing players and talent for the West Indies because they've got the population. So Jamaica's probably going to have a team. Trinidad and Tobago will probably have a team. Homer Bryant, Lara, and who else? Chris Gale, obviously, is Jamaican. He's probably going to be involved with a Jamaican team. And Guyana, you've got Shardapool and Ramanesh Sarwan, famous Ghanaian players. They're the three big nations when it comes to cricket in the West Indies that supply the majority of players. They've got Antigua and Barbuda. You've got Barbados have a lot of good cricketers in the past. St Kitts and Nevis have good players. So the West Indies could send 8 different teams to the Olympics for the cricket, in theory. There's enough players there. In regards, will they all be professional players or will they have to be amateurs? That'll be interesting. How the qualification process for the Olympics would work. Is it going to be T20 or one day? I would think it'd be a T20 format. Get 2 to 4 matches a day done that way. It's going to be interesting how they schedule it and what quality the American team's going to be because they are also interested in getting a Major League Cricket. They have already got a roadmap for Major League Cricket in the US. The Canadians play cricket. They've got their own T20 professional competition in Canada. that is played, and some decent quality talent goes over there to play. It's just one of the lesser um, T20 franchise leagues. So there's the Canadians play. It's going to be interesting the quality of the American team that they put on the field and how well they play. There's a big West Indian community in the US. There's a lot of West Indians, especially Jamaicans and Trinidadians, in the NCAA programs in the collegiate system when in track and field athletics. So there is a large number of Caribbean nationals who would have, in theory, could qualify for the West Indies if they were to choose cricket as a sport. Already in the US, there is a large West Indian community in the US, in Florida and in places like Texas. There is. So it'll be interesting to see if in their collegiate system they start using in the NCAA system cricket. Um, they've taken to rugby union with Major League Rugby like a duck takes to water. And the Americans, once they get the bug of a sport, they will want to win at everything. Of course, they've got 300 years worth of cricketing history to catch up with, compared to the Dutch and the British and us. So they've got 300 years worth of development and learning to do in 5. But it's America; they'll just throw money at the problem and they'll invest heavily in trying to get as many people playing as possible. And it'd be interesting to see what cricket they carry on their networks, on their sports networks. How much cricket is actually broadcast in the US to the sports audience, really, to sports fans in the US. How popular it is on ESPN or on NBC or whatever carrier will be carrying the Cricket World Cup. In the US, it'll be interesting to see what the TV viewership is like, and if there actually is enough cricket fans and those with an interest in the sport who aren't West Indian nationals over there for educational work, actual Americans, US citizens who are interested in the sport. It'll be interesting to see how many, American tourists, for example, take in a match at Lord's or the Oval, for example, when they're in London. How many Americans have actually watched T20 one day or Test cricket, for example? It'd be very, very interesting. It'd be interesting to look at the facts and figures over the last 20 years, for example. It will be. But, obviously, rugby league's going to the US next year with the NRL. People are saying that's going to fail. They're going to Vegas. So I can't see it failing, but everyone has their eyebrow raising moment. But the US wants to be involved in as many sports as possible. And as soon as they find out there's a World Cup in a sport and they're not part of it, they want to be part of it. And this is a chance for cricket really to explode. The Canadians already play it to a decent standard, to one-day standard. So they've got their version of the IPL in Canada, where a lot of West Indian players play. The Americans obviously want Major League Cricket, so they're already trying to sell the product to the wider American domestic audience. So we'll see. We'll see what the next 5 years and the Olympic cycle holds. We'll see how it all plays out. But golf's done really well at the Olympics. Rugby sevens has done really well at the Olympics. So I can see it being a real opportunity for growth. And of course, it's on free to air coverage, so that's a win-win. It might be one of the few Olympic events I actually watch by this one. Yeah, rugby union in Canada is in a bit of a shambles, really. It's a shame with what's happened with the Canadian setup and how it's gone. Same with you. But the failure to qualify for this World Cup is a big blow to the Canadian side of things with rugby union. But the US failed to qualify as well. And for a long time, Canada dominated the US. And the last 5-10 years, it hasn't been the case. So, but we'll see what happens. I think Canada has the conditions for good rugby union and cricket, but there's a lot of issues with a lot of sports in Canada. Even ice hockey's got problems, and it's more to do with governance rather than participation. It's more to do with the governance side of things, and a lot of scandal involving sports governance has been a massive issue in Canada. Get rid of BMX in the Olympics, replace with cricket. Um, Look, the X Games, a lot of sports that are participated at the X Games have now become Olympic sports. And the IOC are very, very mindful of the fact that they want to continue to be a viable commercial, the Olympics to be viable commercially, because a lot of Olympics have failed to make money. And they want to keep that audience growing. And the younger fans have been switching off more traditional Olympic events. They're just not watching eventing. They're not watching the gymnastics. They're not watching, you know, the velodrome cycling, for example. Younger fans are switching off established Olympic sports. So there's been this growth in skateboarding and BMXing and the X Games, and even with the Winter Olympics as well. A lot of like the half pipes and all this. There has been a massive, massive drive by the IOC to get more of the extreme sports into the Olympic program. They have to. They are aware that generally Olympic viewership is more the older audience and really young and families with youngsters. Teenagers and young adults in their 20s don't really watch the Olympics. To have things like the BMX and skateboarding, and then the extreme skiing, like extreme snowboarding sports like ski cross and the snowboarding half pipe in the Winter Olympic program, is drawing younger fans, some of whom are quite wealthy, to want to go to the Olympics to spend money, want to buy the merchandise, want to buy the video games. They are very, very mindful that if they continue with the old school Olympic sports like pentathlon, decathlon, they're not going to draw the fans in. And Olympics are notorious for costing more than they make in revenue and being money pits and their thing called Olympic legacy. Um, get rid of BMX. It's barely been an Olympic sport. I think it's a difficult one. Boxing is the one most at risk of being dropped from the Olympics, ironically, not some of the newer sports that have been admitted like BMX and skateboarding. It's actually boxing. There is a battle with the IOC and the various boxing governing bodies about a variety of issues. Boxing is beset by scandal and some of these YouTube fights. I mean, God. Yeah, and then of course when you've got someone who is a recognisable, marketable individual, um, that helps again generate interest, which generates revenue, even during an Olympic cycle. So merchandise gets sold. People suddenly want to buy tickets to go to the games because that individual athlete is there. So suddenly there's a surge with purchasing tickets. The organisers of every Olympics are very, very mindful that it's a very expensive enterprise to set up the infrastructure, to prepare, to host. It costs a lot of money. And the last few Olympics have lost massive amounts of money, which puts pressure on the IOC. It puts pressure on sponsors. It puts pressure on the TV companies going, is it actually worth bidding for the rights to be the broadcaster? Even though in some countries, certain broadcasters, it's enshrined in law that they have to broadcast, whether they want to or not because of the cost. This is a fact. Because they're here in the UK, for example, the BBC is the broadcaster of the Olympics, and Channel 4 is the broadcaster of the Paralympics, and they have to broadcast. They have to be on free-to-air broadcast. Eurosport does have rights as well, but they're a partner. They're not the main broadcaster. They're in partnership with the BBC and Channel 4 broadcasting. Here in the UK, at least. Other countries, I can't comment on who the host broadcaster is. I think it's NBC in the US, if I'm not mistaken. Boxing should never be dropped. It's one of the most traditional. Yes, but there's issues between the IOC and the governing body of boxing at the amateur level. There's been a lot of scandal, and it's all political. It's like the NHL and the IOC and the IIHF who pays for the player insurance if a player gets injured. And the NHL players were meant to go to Beijing. They didn't because of the Chinese government's COVID rules that would basically make it impossible. But no, the Greeks, look, the Greeks didn't obviously have BMX, wasn't at the Greek Games in 2004 in Athens. Um, Now, the Olympic movement, the IOC, has faced a lot of criticism as well. The the various sports, obviously, they want to get on the Olympic program because it means extra government funding and other commercial funding. Even if they are a professional sport, it means increased funding for the grassroots, the infrastructure projects, training, name it, get it. So, rugby sevens, rugby union is now professional, the top level. Um, all the sevens players are on centralised contracts. It also means if you qualify for the Olympics, you get extra funding. And you get extra sponsorship. So then you have some of the pro cyclists on the road racing, extra funding. Um, if BMX is allowed at the Olympics, then yo-yo should be allowed to walk the dog. Look, will you be attending the first test between England and Tonga at St Helens? Yet no. I haven't got the money. I don't get paid for another 2 weeks, and I'm heavily in debt. I owe the bank nearly £1,000. Yeah, I haven't got the money. While I would love to hop on a train, go up to Merseyside, and catch a game, the return ticket will cost more than the ticket for the test match, and I wouldn't be able to get back for work on Monday. There's engineering works on the line that I live on, rail line. I wouldn't be able to get up there, and then if I did get up there, I wouldn't be able to get back down again in time for work. Now, as I've always stated, if this channel was to become viral and pay for itself, pay me more money than what I'm earning at my current job, and I could live comfortably, I would happily go. Um, I don't, where are you going from? Because you're already based in the north, so I'm based near London. We're talking a couple £100. A single ticket is it £200-300? The time of day I'll be travelling, and people say, "Well, get the train to Victoria and then get one of the." Yeah, see, there you go. County Durham to be fair, County Durham to Merseyside isn't actually the easiest journey direct either. You either go across to Carlisle and down the West Coast main line, or you go across to Newcastle, go down the East Coast main line, and then get a transfer and go over the Pennines. That's a couple of trains there. So that's not just a direct train. It's a shambles, absolute shambles. Look, I mean, I might try and go to some London Broncos games next year, but even to get to Wimbledon, I've still got to take 3, possibly 4 trains to get to Plough Lane and the bus. It's not. People think everyone in there's a misconception that everyone in the south of England, the southeast, is minted, and that we get all the infrastructure projects and all the trains work. They don't. I've not been able to do any weekend shopping, like go on the train and go to places like Guildford or Reading, which are the two big areas for shopping locally, or go see my friends in Maidenhead, from where I am. For 3 months, there's not been a train on a Saturday or Sunday that isn't affected by strikes or engineering works for 3 months where I live. I'm on, 70p above minimum wage. So I'm not taking home a massive paycheck every month. What for London Broncos? They were getting around 5,000 last time they were in Super League when they were playing the Trail Finders at Ealing. They were actually doing quite well. The announcement when they said they were going to part-time status really concerned me. There are rugby league fans in the southeast. I'm one of them. I would reckon they're going to get more than 400 fans because they're playing higher quality opposition. But it's the southeast. It is expensive. You have to ask how much the Broncos have been charging for tickets, and also they're in London, so away fans. A lot of fans, like up in the north, do not have disposable income, and a lot of fans in the south would have had disposable income when the London Broncos were last in Super League. They don't now because the cost of living in London and the southeast is ridiculous, ridiculous. Now, if I was to live up in County Durham, Lancashire, Cumbria, or the old former county of Westmoreland, I would be minted. Honestly, the rents are so much less. If I was to live somewhere like Carlisle or Lancaster, for example, or Penrith, um, you know, I would easily be able to afford to, live quite comfortably. I would have paid off my overdraft to the bank and not be that'll be just for emergencies only. Wouldn't have to go into it every month. Because I live in the southeast, my rent is eye watering. My council tax is eye watering, and food prices are higher in the south than in the north. Everything is train tickets are ridiculous. If I lived north of Birmingham with the wage I'm on, I'm laughing to the bank. The cost of living in the southeast is ridiculous, and that has a bearing on being able to afford to do things. I would love to go see the London Broncos play every home game. It is not financially viable. I would have to get one, two, three, four trains just to get there, and four trains home plus a bus, two buses. I would have to get four trains there and four trains back. I'd have to make three separate changes of train just to get to Wimbledon, which I believe is the closest station from Plough Lane. But then I would have to get a taxi or a bus to Plough Lane. And I don't particularly want to walk around southwest London, not quite sure where the new Plough Lane is to get to the game thing. It's expensive, but it's not a cheap exercise. Um, I only live I don't live too far from London. It's not a cheap exercise. Now, would I love to do that? Absolutely. I would love if I had the means. I would love to go watch. Um, would love to go. I can't get direct to Wimbledon. I have to change trains multiple times. Um, that is a massive problem. So Crowthorne and Wokingham to Twickenham on the Kingston Loop line, depending which service to Wimbledon. It's three or four trains. It honestly depends on what services are running and where engineering works. So I might not be able to get there at all. Um, and this is what sports. This is what the TV companies, when they're complaining about, oh, there's empty seats in this game. Well, it's a Friday night. You've changed the kickoff time. If let's say London Broncos are playing on a Friday night at home, I can't get there. Wouldn't be able to get there because I wouldn't be able to get home in time for the last train because there's a 3 hour gap between trains on a weekday at my local station. So between 8:30 and 11, there's no train. I would not get in until we're talking nearly midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. If the London Broncos are playing a home game on a Friday evening or a Thursday evening for TV, it's just not feasible. And then they wonder, well, oh, but they're only averaging X amount per home game in the Championship, or they're only averaging, or they've got low crowds on. There's a reason for this. Now, rugby league is different to football, which is different to rugby union, which is different to cricket. But when when I look at games at Wembley, doesn't matter what the sport is, but games at Wembley, there's always empty seats. Wembley is a pain in the arse. Pain in the arse to get to. Now, yes, there are London Overground, Underground, and mainline stations by Wembley, but it's not in the best location in Greater London. Depending on where you're coming from, you can get direct into London, and you've got to get underground and then to other mainline. Wembley's in a horrible location. Horrible location. It's not as well connected as you think. It isn't. If I want to go direct, it's four trains. Manchester, then you're not going direct. You're changing. You're changing trains. So you're not going direct. You're actually going indirect because you've got multiple changes. So basically, to watch, let's say St Helens play at home. Let's say you want to choose what you're a neutral because you're from County Durham. But let's say you want to watch St Helens at home. You've got to take 8 trains plus 2 buses or 2 taxis, depending on how you go from St Helens train station to the ground. Unless you want to walk it, which St Helens is not the most delightful place in the world. It's a bit of a acquired taste. I had a friend who went to university and was lived in St Helens up there. That's a lot of travel. That's not. If you miss one of your connections, you can miss the start of the game. If there's any delays, if there's any issues, if there's any diversions, any engineering works, that completely stuffs you getting to the game on time. And this is what team owners and broadcasters don't quite realise is the expense and the difficulty in making sure fans can get to and from games all right. So when we're discussing changing kickoff times for TV, there's a reason why fans are pissed off. For you to go from County Durham, I don't know where you live in County Durham, by the way, but we'll say Durham, Chester Street, we'll say something like that. For you to go from the eastern side of the north to the western side of the north in a diagonal fashion, you've got to take 4 trains to get there and 4 trains to get back. And if you drive, it takes, I don't know how long the train journey is, but it's a nightmare. Then, if you want to drive, like you said, it takes about 2.5 hours, and that's hoping that there's no pile ups and snarl ups on the motorways and A roads, no roadworks, there's no diversions. The weather hasn't had an impact. Whole number of things. But when it comes down to it, TV companies have too much say on when games take place, what time they start, what time they finish. And now with Sky Sports having the rights to broadcast every game live, we're going to see a lot of evening kickoffs on a Thursday and a Friday. We're going to see a lot of games start very late on a Thursday and Friday, and potentially Saturday evening with the evening kickoffs, which, if you're relying on public transport to get to and from the game, you got really stuffed, especially on a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday late in the evening. Let's say there's a game, let's say it's, I don't know, London Broncos are playing at home against St Helens Thursday evening. The fans from St Helens have somehow got to get back from London at full time from Wimbledon. So it's not as if they're in central London. They've got to get back from Wimbledon to St Helens on a Thursday or Friday night. And if they miss a connecting train, they are stuffed. Absolutely buggered. The only way they can do it is to get the underground from Wimbledon to King's Cross, Euston, St Pancras, or Marylebone, I believe, and get one of the trains going north. I believe it's Euston they would have to get the train from. I believe, because I've been to Liverpool on the train when I was a kid and went from Euston. So they missed one train, and Euston obviously had a massive snarl up with the signalling at the weekend. No trains were going out for 3-4 hours. There was multiple delays all day. Let that sink in. Euston's a nightmare to get out of. So you've got to get the underground. And a lot of people from St Helens obviously have a lot of experience in using the underground. We always challenge cup wins and go to Wembley a lot. But you think of it. I use St Helens as an example because I know there's a direct route from Liverpool to London Euston. That's probably the most direct train route for a rugby league club from the north playing against London away. Fixturing is going to be a nightmare this season coming up. Absolute nightmare. And I feel sorry for the fans of Cornwall going all over the country in League One. So I feel there is a clear concern for me that I don't think the people in charge of the governance side of rugby league or any sport in this country really give a toss about the fans. Let's be honest. They say we want to put the fans first. They don't. They put their own interests first, where they can make some money, not the fan welfare, getting to and from safely, not ticket prices being reasonable. Sports governance does not. Fans are an afterthought. So when we see kickoffs being changed for TV, and now Sky have got the rights to every single game, we're going to see a lot of Thursday and Friday night games kicking off really, really late, finishing. Will there be time to get the last train home? I mean, we are going to see, and that's a big discussion point. If you want, and they say, well, we like the 3 p.m. football blackout to protect attendances. Fans have already been screwed over now. The amount of midweek games we have that have poor attendances, the FA Cup with poor attendances, the League Cup have got no attendance really. And they're saying, but the Premier League crowd numbers are good. Premier League crowds are good. Well, there are 72 other clubs in the Football League pyramid from League 2 to Championship There are empty seats all over the place, and some Premier League clubs don't even sell out. I don't buy this, but as long as they're making money out of TV deals and sponsorships, and there's some dodgy brown envelopes changing hands, they do not care about the fans. Like, as long as money's being made, they don't care about it. And we can debate that to death. We can debate that to death. Fans have not been, put first with any decision in regards to, uh, you know, um, changes to kick-off times, structural changes to leagues, ticket sales, merchandise prices. I look at some of the replica shirts, and I look at potentially. I've never paid full price for any of my sports tops ever. When it comes to my NFL, my ice hockey, my football, never pay full price. But I look at some of the prices being quoted for an adult medium or an adult large, depending on manufacturer. That's what I wear. I'm not willing to pay nearly £300 in some cases for a top. It's not for an NHL authentic. I'm looking at 160 to 170 pounds for an Adidas authentic. No, don't get Fanatics; they fall apart. Um, I've got a Fanatics NFL top. It's falling apart. I barely wear it. It's horrible. Yeah, I've got an authentic one as well, not falling apart. I look at and people go, "It's wrong. It's really sad. A grown man wearing a replica NFL top." I enjoy it. I don't care. But I look at the prices on online and in store. I'm shocked. I'm just stunned. And then I look at the manufacturing quality, and it's not as good as what it was 10, 20, 25 years ago. Which is why a lot of the retro, or as I call them, retro jerseys are really desirable because they've stood the test of time. They were well made. Now they're not so well made. They're overpriced. Um, I look at the rise in value of a match day program, how much they're going for now at match days. It's ridiculous. For less content in the match day program. Like I look at because I've got a collection of match day programs from the 90s. I look at how much they're charging for the match day program in 1992, 93, 94, 95, whenever. I look at the price. Now that's reasonable. Pound 50, pound 50p, whatever. And they're quite thick. I look at later programs in the 2000s and 2010s, and now you're paying 3 times as much for less content actually in the matchday program. And then they wonder why people don't buy the matchday programs anymore. And then you look at the price of food and drink at games, parking charges if you drive to a game, connectivity. Team owners don't care as long as they're making money. The leagues don't care as long as they're making money. The TV companies don't care unless there's too many empty seats. And it looks bad for live TV when you're trying to sell the product to an overseas market. Generally speaking, I do mean this. Fans are always an afterthought. They're an afterthought when it comes to ticket prices, merchandise prices, food and drink. Some of the prices being charged for food and drink is ridiculous. The transportation issues, um, and then they wonder why some teams are struggling to make money. Why we've got teams going bust. Why we've got teams being wound up. And it's not just rugby league. Rugby unions in the same perilous situation. Um, there are financial issues. The Newcastle Falcons are in money, got money issues. They're one of multiple rugby union clubs in financial difficulty, which does have an impact on the national side. Rugby league is in the same situation. Um, I do hope the London Broncos make a good fist of it back in Super League and crowd numbers bounce back up. I really hope that. I think it's important that we have a team in the national capital because then it gives more legitimacy to rugby league as a national league, so we can grow nationally. But like I say, it's the way things are going right now. I don't know. I have my concerns about a lot of professional sports. Um, I really do have concerns about things, um, and we will. And I have discussed. I have discussed. Um, I mean, discussing the media rights. Um, you know, I've raised media rights before. I do think streaming companies like Netflix will at some point bid for media rights. I have no doubt on that. I have no doubt that um, at some point we are going to see Netflix bid for you know um, media rights in regards to live sport. Um, I think it's a matter of time before it happens. I think it will happen sooner rather than later. Obviously, we've got multiple leagues and multiple sports have their upcoming rights negotiations. It'll be interesting to see if they do bid for some Premier League games or Championship games. They've done all these fly on the wall sports documentaries. They've obviously recently done the David Beckham documentary, which has met with a lot of positive praise. A lot of praise for the David Beckham documentary. Um, Even from non-sports fans, really got into it, and that's had great reviews. They've done multiple sports documentaries where they follow a team around, or they're doing a documentary about a current or ex athlete, and they get really good reviews. So Netflix have obviously got into the sports media market, and now they probably want to get some live sport there. Obviously, this summer we've seen what's happened with BT Sport and the potential. Obviously, with this new TNT Sports, they are going to merge with Eurosport. It's going to be interesting to see the subscription figures and how many people ultimately, uh, you know, renew their subscriptions or stay subscribed to the new rebranded TNT, and whether it can be a viable network, because BT lost a lot of money, um, a lot of money with um, BT Sport. BT Group was hemorrhaging money; it wasn't profitable. So it's very interesting that Warner Brother Discovery Group, which pulled out the US regional sports market, very very interesting that whether they look at it and go, is this actually worth persisting with? They've invested a lot of money into it. And they were losing money on their US sports arm as a wider media group. They've recently pulled out of the sports media market, um, and sports broadcasting in the US. So that really was an eyebrow raiser for me, considering that they withdrew from the US sports market but wanted to get involved in the UK and Ireland sports market. Really eyebrow raising, that one, considering they have a much bigger potential viewership in the US for population than in the UK and Ireland. But we shall see if this rebranded TNT can be viable long term, or are we going to have another ITV Sport or Setanta on our hands? And if they do go belly up, how much of an impact that's going to have on rugby union and club football? Um, I mean, there are some sports and teams still recovering from the Setanta collapse, which was 15 years ago, and ITV Sports belly up 2 decades ago. The effects are still being felt now by some clubs and, and teams. So it will be very, very interesting to see how it all plays out, and the dynamics behind it, and you know if long term it is viable. Um, there, the COVID pandemic did have a massive impact, a much bigger impact than people realised. Much bigger impact than people realised on professional sport and on the broadcasters. People did cancel Sky and BT subscriptions um, by the handful. It it became a financial disaster for um, it did become a uh, massive financial money pit, especially the 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 Premier League pay per view fiasco. That was disastrous. That was absolutely disastrous, and it cost them more money than it actually made. It was financially ruinous. They hemorrhaged money, and when they stated that they withdrew from doing it for commercial reasons, it became an embarrassment. It was a PR nightmare. It didn't work. The optics were bad. They were massively criticised on social media. Yet the viewership figures when they were playing games on the free to air BBC and ITV, when no fans were allowed in attendance and the season resumed in 2020, was some of the biggest viewership figures domestic football has ever had outside of a cup competition for league football. It was ridiculous. So I am surprised that a free to air broadcaster hasn't come in and said, look, we'll take a handful of games per match day weekend throughout the season, or a midweek game that no one really wants, and put that up. Surprised that hasn't been the case. I'm surprised, the free to air broadcasters like the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5 haven't come in and said, we'll have some rights to some midweek games. Just get them on the TV. Um, Surprised that hasn't been the case, but we'll see what happens in regards to the Premier League and TV rights. There's going to be more games that are available to be broadcast domestically. We may be seeing the end of 3 p.m. broadcasting blackout. We shall see. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. It's been an interesting little live stream. Really appreciate it. And I will have more content for you very, very soon. Come on, content stream.